And anyway, I don't know what happened, but we ended up in the middle of the mafia. And I just remember him coming home, and we'd been there 3 or 4 weeks, and he said, we've got to leave. We've got to go immediately. Anyway, he's going in, he's trying to get out of his truck, and all of a sudden this woman is banging on the door. She's trying to get in. Well, that's what I found out a lot lizard was.
Thanks for joining us. We have Mary today. She's going to share a little bit about her family and her upbringing and experiences. She's currently working in real estate, so she has got a lot of interesting stories she's been telling me about. So why don't we start with your family and upbringing?
Okay, I was raised in southern Indiana, in Scottsburg, Indiana, town of 4,000, so it's really different than South Florida. I mean, that was it. It was just all country around. There were only 2 towns in that little county, and Scottsburg had 4,000 people, and 5 miles away was Austin, and it had about 3,800 people, and that was it. I was the third of 4 children. I had an older sister, 10 years older than me, and then my brother, 8 years older, myself, and then my youngest brother was born with Down syndrome, so I was 5 when he was born. And actually what happened was he had Down syndrome, but he was born in a clinic in that little town of Scottsburg. Somehow he got encephalitis on top of the Down syndrome, so that he would have been educable before, but then that made him only trainable. So his entire life, he'd lived to be 35. His mental age was only about like a 3-year-old. So back to when he was first born, Mother said that she wanted to take us, you kids, over here to Muscatatuck Institution to see these other kids like your little brother. What she was doing was trying to talk us into keeping him, because she didn't want to see him go anyplace. At that time, you didn't keep these kids, you just put them in an institution. And there was no education of any type for them, and the government had no programs for them. So I remember, as young as I was at 5, going in and seeing these huge, huge baby cribs with like 20 little Downs babies in them. And but they were probably 2 or 3 years old, and they all had diapers on, but it was a lot of kids. She talked to us and all that, and then we ended up coming home. My dad came home from work, and we all sat around the dinner table and talked about what we should do. Should we put Boppy over there, or are we going to keep him at home and raise him? And of course she gave us the big sales pitch. And so everybody was, you know, let's keep him, let's keep him. So we did. That was tough. That was tough growing up. But then we had the tornadoes that came through. We lived in town, and then when I was getting ready to go to college, my parents bought 350 acres of woods, or about 11 miles out in the country, where they could have the timber farmed. And then that way, that would be a source of income to take care of him after they passed away. Well, after they had gotten out there and built a new little home, there were 2 tornadoes. They met together and they just wiped the property out. After that, I was on the phone. I was up in Indianapolis working at the time, and I remember calling Mother because I'd heard about the weather, and that's before we had all this sophisticated internet stuff we have now and all the radar. And she was screaming. I could hear her, and then I don't know how I got her on the phone, but she said, Bobby's outside, I can't get him inside. And she said, he's frozen, he's just standing straight up. She said, all I can see is his basketball shorts on and his white t-shirt. And she said, I can't do anything. So I found out later what she did. She ran back out. She was throwing her arms around his ankles, but he was in a state of shock. Because of all, I guess, the pressure from the tornadoes or the sound. She said it sounded like a freight train was coming through their property. He lived through that, but it was really strange. These 2 tornadoes formed, but when it came to the edge of our property, it just mowed it. It was just like you took a big mower and went through all this classified forest and mowed it down until it got up to the part where our house was built, and then it just jumped right over Bobby in the house and went on down through the property and destroyed it. Fast forwarding, I have 4 children, and then I have nieces and nephews from my sister and brother. And they only know Bobby from the time after that, because they weren't born yet. It was after the tornado. And he never talked after that. Very limited speech. He was always waiting for the tornado to come back. So he never wanted to stay in his bedroom anymore. He wanted his bed to be right in front of the front windows. He wanted Mother to take down all the big curtains in the front. That's where he slept. And so that's the way they grew up, was just visiting Bobby in front of that window.
So it's kind of like he maybe got PTSD or something.
He must have.
Something like
and
that.
And he couldn't express himself. But after that, what little he did verbalize, because before he was pretty loud, like the rest of the family. After that, if he did try to say anything, it was just a whisper.
So it sounds like, I'm sure there were some challenges, being raised with him and
Yeah.
Dealing with some of his difficulties, but overall, it sounds like it was very rewarding, a positive presence, I think, in the house.
It was, and I'll tell you, it was especially for our kids. It was, my sister was gone, my brother was gone, I'm the one that was really, I grew up with him. And it was difficult, it really was. But there were good times and bad times, like you say. But the grandchildren, they have empathy for everyone. They'll fight for anybody that's the underdog or anybody that has a disability. It's just ingrained in them. Because they usually came on weekends. My mother she always wanted the grandkids there. So she would drive and meet you halfway if you lived 3 counties away just to get them there on the weekend. So they've all grown up together, and they all grew up with Bobby. One of my direct descendants is Susanna Martin, and Susanna Martin was executed as a witch in 1692 in Salem, Massachusetts. She came from England, and when she was 18, she was from a huge family in England. She married a guy in the colonies there in Massachusetts, and whose wife had died, and he had a child. And then they got married, and there were like 8 kids. And she must have been real bossy. Anyway, she didn't take any garbage off anybody. And somebody got mad at her about something and accused her of some of their cows ended up drowning. It was kind of like in the Bible where they talk about, the demons went into the cows and they went over the cliff. Well, they started saying she made their cows jump into the water and die. So that was the first accusation. And anyway, the husband fought and said this stuff's so untrue and everything, and she got acquitted for that, and there was no big deal, or they didn't think. So then it turned around, there were some young girls that were probably middle school age, and they got sick. They came down with some kind of illness and so forth. And so then somehow they had done something wrong, and the parents were trying to pin it on somebody, and so they were saying they got sick because she put a spell on them, witchcraft and all this other. So the witchcraft stuff came up, or the witch stuff came up again, and this time she didn't get out of it. So they had a trial, and I've got the exact transcript, word for word, that everybody said. And anyway, there were 14 of them that were killed, and I always thought they were, like burned at the stake like you see at Halloween or something, but they hung everybody. They had some of them, there were 4 that died in prison. Then the others were all killed. They were all exonerated right after they died, except for her. And so this was the early 1700s. That's when the governor, somebody said, we made a terrible mistake. These people really shouldn't have died. And so they gave everybody their pardon, except for poor Susanna. And they finally, in 2002, that's a long time to wait for her family, which is part of my family. Anyway, they said that she didn't have anything to do with that, and she was not a witch and so forth. And so they've got a plaque for her someplace in the park now, and I need to go see that at some point. That's it.
Yeah. Interesting bit of history. So why don't we move a little bit more into you? So how was your experience in school? Maybe give us a brief overview of kind of grade school and then any potential college as well.
I have 8 or 9 girlfriends still that I grew up with, and we still stay in contact. We all grew up in that same little town. Little did I know that, I talked about the 2 towns. We didn't know this until we had one of our reunions when we got together about 8 years ago. That whole area was KKK. And we lived 30 miles north of Louisville. And of course, Louisville was, integrated. What happened was, when we got together for this trip, we went to North Carolina, and we rented a cabin. Took a class at Hanover College, and it was a political science class, and why I was taking that, I don't know. But anyway, they showed a picture. They were talking about the KKK and how it was so prominent in Indiana at that time. I don't know what it's like now, but anyway, they said it was. They started talking about Scott County, because this Hanover College was the next county over. Anyway, they were saying that it was really prevalent and that it had been tied up through a political system, through like the sheriffs or whatever, for generations really. And we saw this picture, and they had the different people there, and the head person, which I think they called the head dragon or something, anyway, happened to be somebody that I knew, that all of us girls knew when we were growing up, and it just shocked us to pieces. And we were able to find that by going back to our library, because it's all there. My parents had a little motel besides the nursing and the government job. And I can remember that Mother would tell me, I would go out and they had different cabins, and I'd go out and help after a guest would stay. I'd help, you know, make the beds and clean the tubs and toilets and all that stuff and get ready for the next one. Well, I remember one time there was a black lady pregnant and her husband that stopped. I remember Mother saying that she would let them stay, but they needed to be out by 6 a.m. in the morning. That same night, the sheriff came out and he talked to Mother, and I just remember her saying she's pregnant and she had to have a place to stay, and I couldn't say no, and she'll be gone by in the morning. And then that's what he said, is just make sure she's gone in the morning. So I didn't understand then, because none of this was ever talked about to any of us kids. None of us knew about it. So it shocked us all when we were in our early 70s and hearing this stuff. It's not like that now. It's very integrated, or it's a lot more integrated than it was. But that's the way it was back in the 1950s. Not a good thing.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's sad to hear, but, you know, that is part of history.
Well, you know, here, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but it's like Mother. I was in the youth orchestra. I played French horn, and she took me for private lessons to Louisville, and there was no interstate at that point, so it was US 31 that runs parallel with I-65 now. And she would, you know, take me down there every week, and then I got into the Louisville Youth Orchestra. But I do remember her saying that she wanted me to be around all types of kids, and that's one reason she would take me there. So I was really the only one out of any of my friends that was ever exposed to anybody, because it was just like you were locked in your little area.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. So how about your experience in high school and stuff like that? Were you involved with different clubs or sports, anything like that?
Okay, not sports. All my kids are, it seems like sports are real big. Anyway, I was in band. I started private French horn lessons when I was in 3rd grade and kept that up and did that through college. So I was in band, and I was in cheerleading, and then I was all in the different clubs they had, like the drama club and all the normal activities they kind of still have. I graduated in 1967, and that's right where, when you went to school, there were no such things as pants or blue jeans in school. A girl had to be in a dress or had to be in a skirt. It wasn't uniform because it was a public school. They measured. We had our principal go around, and he had a yardstick. And so I remember being stopped more than once, and he would hold that, he'd say, Maryvale. He'd hold that yardstick there on the ground and come over, and he made sure that it wasn't more than 3 inches above my knee, or he was calling Mother, and she's going to have to take me home and make me change my outfit. And I remember when Mother took me to get my clothes for school or for college, my freshman year, she didn't have very much money, because Brace and Bobby took everything, because there was no SSI, there was no, I mean, his medicine was unreal. So anyway, there's no extra money. But anyway, she works extra jobs, so did Dad, so they get this money to get me all my nice clothes for college. Everything matched. My shoes matched my purse, which matched my outfit, and it was dresses, you know, or skirts, or sweaters. And, but it was matchy, matchy, matchy. So I go to college, my first semester, and this is really sad, but this is right where, this is Vietnam, okay? It's right there where all the protests started. We didn't know what they were doing in that little town of ours because we were so protected, you know. We knew there was a war, but none of that stuff was brought up to us. We just were protected. Anyway, I remember hearing all this stuff when I got there, and they were burning bras, and you'll see stuff like that. I remember girls hanging their bras on the balconies, you know, and just stupid things. Anyway, I came home at Christmas time, and here's this nice little girl that grew up in little Scottsburg, and I come home for Christmas break, and I had on blue jeans. Well, they were bell-bottom blue jeans. Never had a pair of jeans in my life until those. Had on a flannel shirt and no bra on it, under it. Mom and Dad never said anything. They just looked at me and never asked where those fancy clothes went. But I don't remember wearing them after that. I really don't know what happened to them. I remember one time, and this is terrible too, after growing up with them in church, and Dad, he hadn't visited for a long time, and to get to visit me was like 3.5 hour drive. So he came home to move me is what it was. It was after one of the semesters. I mean, he says, I'm going to take off work such and such time, I'll be there. And he said, we can go to your church. And I said, oh, good, we'll go to your church when you get here, or we'll go to my church. Well, he got there, so frantically, the night before, I'm going through the phone book trying to figure out where I'm going to go to church, because I hadn't been going to church all semester. I found a Church of Christ, and I didn't know that there was any difference in churches. It looked like what I grew up in as far as what I read. So we go in, but it turned out to be non-instrumental. So again, it was one of those things where he just looked at me and smiled, and he knew I'd never been there, and that was the first time there. And of course, I didn't know how to greet anybody. I didn't know anybody there. So I learned my lesson from that too.
So he caught you, huh?
Yeah, but they were great parents. They were not condemning at all.
Let's go a little bit into, you said you were going into college, right? So what did you study when you were in college?
Music education, special education.
Okay.
And graduated with a degree K through 12. That's when they started what they call an area major. That's where you cover kindergarten through 12th grade with the bands and orchestras and all that. So that's basically what I did. Once I graduated, then I taught for a while, and then I got into retail sales of pianos and the grands and stuff that you put in the universities, and did that for about 30 years. And then now I've been doing real estate the last 20.
I like how you said that the 30 years you did was for a little bit.
But yeah, that's what it seems like.
For a little bit,
For a little bit.
Just 30 years. That's only a whole career,
Well,
but
yeah, that's right.
You must have been pretty good at it, I'm sure.
I'm trying to think here. I got out of college and I met my husband. I met him in Indianapolis. I went to school in Indiana State University, which was in Terre Haute, Indiana. It was west of Indianapolis. Anyway, my first job I worked, it was in a Steinway and a Yamaha store. Anyway, that's where actually I had met him, and then it was a while later we got married. But anyway, I can remember after we got married, we ended up going to New Jersey because we had someone that said, if you ever want to come out here, this is a great music company and so forth, and we'll hire you and blah, blah, blah. And anyway, I don't know what happened, but we ended up in the middle of the mafia. And I just remember him coming home, and we'd been there 3 or 4 weeks. And he said, we've got to leave. We've got to go immediately. So we packed everything up overnight. First of all, we had 2 older girls, and we had his mother fly in and take the girls out. And then we were driving the truck back, and we were concerned whether we would even get back or not, but we got across the border okay, and then we seemed to be okay. Anyway, I don't know what he experienced or what happened. All I know is we were married almost 30 years before he died, and he never would say what happened. So I don't know. I'm going to ask him someday when I see him. I'm going to say, okay, now you can tell me because you're safe.
Yeah.
So we can find out. But anyway, I can remember one time, it was after that when he came back, because he was really laying low. He never got back in the music business. I think he was told to never get back into it. He was a professional organist, and he was a phenomenal musician. And he would never touch piano, organ, anything again. He would live with my uncle for a while, who was a lumberjack. He lived out in the woods. He was just like underground. I remember him calling me one day, and he said, I've got a job. And he had been in Naval Air. He was on the Baham Richard, which was a naval aircraft carrier in Vietnam. So, he had done a lot of things. I don't know if he'd had this other training or not as far as driving semis, but he called and he said, somebody has just left this. It was the middle of winter, and he said it's swinging beef. You know what swinging beef is?
No, never heard of it.
That's like the carcasses they have.
Okay.
Okay, that they, before they have a butcher cut them up.
Yeah, okay.
And it was a refrigerated truck, and he said, I've got to take this. I can make this money real fast. It's going to really help us right now. But he said, I've got to drive it. I got to take it to New York, and I got to go across the George Washington Bridge during rush hour. And he said, I need somebody to help me get across. He said, you want to come? And I thought, oh, shoot. I went through life not really realizing what was going on, I think. Anyway, I said, sure. So I remember him picking me up, and we got in there, and we went about, it was a blizzard. We were going up I-65. We got about 40 miles to Columbus, Indiana, going north. We went in, we sat down around the trucker's bar, and we're eating, breakfast and all that stuff. And I remember that was the first time I realized they had showers for truckers, and they had a women's shower too, where you could go. And I thought that was just the coolest thing, because you can go in there and take your clothes and have a shower, while you're riding this big rig. And so anyway, so I start keeping a journal. I'm going to write all this wonderful stuff. Well, long story short is we got stuck out there for like 6 weeks. We couldn't get a ride to get us back home. We first of all, on the way, we were going up through Pennsylvania, and we go on that Pennsylvania Turnpike. I'm still writing my journal because I don't know what I was thinking of. So anyway, he stops at a truck stop, and he's going to go in, and he's going to get some coffee and something else, and he's fried mentally. And this was before anybody had training. You just got in a truck and drove. You didn't have to have a commercial license back then. And that's dangerous. So anyway, he's going in, he's trying to get out of his truck, and all of a sudden this woman is banging on the door. She's trying to get in. Well, that's what I found out a lot lizard was. A lot lizard. Yeah, I'd never know what a lot lizard was.
Yeah, I said, I unfortunately have heard of that as well. So. Okay,
so
Maybe explain for the viewers, because not everybody.
Lot lizard is kind of like a hooker that's hanging out, and and then anyway, these poor guys drive in, and I remember him putting his window down, and he said, "My wife's here," and she said, "I don't care."
As long as you're paying.
Yeah. So anyway, I remember somehow he got out of that truck and got his stuff and got back in, and I thought, boy, I didn't like that very well.
Yeah, no.
And so then we went ahead, and we ended up getting to the George Washington Bridge after midnight. By then, it was, I guess there wasn't any rush hour left, and it was just beautiful. It really was. I remember putting the windows down and went across, and we both had our windows down and taking in the sounds and all this stuff. And we get up to where we're taking this, and they had to open the gates. They had big gates, with guards, and they let us in. And my husband pulls in with the tractor and the trailer. And anyway, the guy came out, and he said, "Don't ever have your windows down in the Bronx at this time of night." He said, "It's too dangerous." So, we had a lot of learning to do. We found out that we thought we could just stay someplace and pull over and sleep. And he said, no, he said, you need to drive back out of this area and go back to Pennsylvania, which was it was an hour and a half, 2 hours. Go back over there and sleep. And he told us where the truck stop was we could go. But he said, you're not staying here. I mean, it was just crazy times. So we went back there, and then that's when the next day, we were stuck. And the only way, and they call it, you have to, sometimes I don't know if it's still the same way or not, but these truckers have these boards, and they look to try to find another load to carry to another city that will pay to get them back home. So that's what my husband was trying to do, but there was nothing that was getting us back to Indiana. So we ended up going down to Slidell, Louisiana, I remember. And we ended up coming, and from there, we got a load somehow to Gloucester, Massachusetts. Okay, Slidell was taking canned goods. And then to save money, it was my idea, I said, let's just save, I think we got an extra $50 or $75 if they didn't unload it. So we unloaded a whole semi of canned goods. Well, that didn't happen again. Anyway, that didn't happen again. Yeah. So, and then from there, I can't remember what we had. We had to go to Hershey, Pennsylvania, and to the chocolate people. And then that took us to St. Simon's Island. St. Simon's Island took us to Gloucester, Massachusetts. And then that took us someplace in Florida. And I remember then he pulled on I-10. And he pulled over one morning. It was about 6 o'clock in the morning. And this is like 6 weeks into this stuff. We don't even know what our kids are doing, We have no cell phones. And he looked at me and he said, "You have ridden long enough." He said, "You're going to start driving." He said, "You've seen me shift this thing." So I about died.
Oh my
but
goodness.
Anyway, I did. I got behind there and he said, "There's only 13 gears." He said, "You've seen them." So anyway.
Only 13.
So anyway, and the only time I got nervous was when I actually got going. And then I said, "What am I going to do when the first ramp comes? I mean, what do I do? What do I do if somebody, how are they going to merge?" And he said, "It's just pull." I remember him so clearly. "Just pull over." He said, "It's just like a baby buggy. It'll follow you. The trailer will follow you. Just pull over." And so that's what I did. So I drove around with him and we shared the driving. Neither one of us had CDL license. I got it later though. Then we were coming back through Tennessee and the Chattanooga area and all those mountains, and I was driving, and that's when I said, "You know, this is a little bit above me." So I said, "I'm gonna get us back home," and that's it. Then we had 2 children after that. We had Carmen and we had Andrew. All the kids were raised in Lexington, Kentucky, which is horse country. It's east of Louisville. Beautiful, beautiful area. It was a good city. My husband ended up with a real strange disease when he was about 52. They're saying a lot of these guys in Vietnam that were on the aircraft carriers, there's a lot of asbestos on there, and so now they have all these lawsuits about asbestosis and all. Well, he was the first person that was diagnosed with pulmonary hypertension in the state of Kentucky, and we had to take him to Louisville to the specialist. They didn't know what to do with him. Nobody knew what to do. So he died when he was 53, 54. And then he got to see 2 of the kids married. And then after his death, the grandkids started coming, and then 2 more marriages that he didn't get to see. That was a tough time. But we all got through it, and we're all stronger for it.
And so then after that, how did you kind of move on from there?
Met Ralph in church. And that was a strange story because I met this guy in the choir. Somehow we started talking and found out that his wife had died about 6 months earlier than my husband. They both died from these strange lung diseases. And we found out that our oldest kids went to high school together. And we didn't know that, and we'd never run into each other. Then we found out that his son was a linebacker for the football team, and my oldest daughter was a trainer for the football team, and they were the same age. And she went ahead and did that at University of Kentucky. There were just so many things that connected us to talk. So we had a lot of fun. Ralph filled a void for 10 years until that poor guy passed away, and he had lung cancer. But he was a jewel because he was just so good and so sweet, and that's what I definitely needed during that time. And he was really good to my kids too.
Are there any other stories you can think to share? Anything interesting?
Let me tell you about my closest friend that I grew up with. Well, I didn't grow up with her. I met her at Foster Music Camp. It's where you would go when you'd audition, and you would go to Eastern Kentucky University, and you would stay for like a month on campus. And it was kind of like interlocking, if you've ever heard of that. But it's where you get advanced training, and they do it in middle school and high school. Anyway, I met this girl, and she and I just really bonded. I was from Indiana, and she was from Kentucky. But she became my closest friend. Her name was Susan, and loved her to death, still love her. And one thing that connected us was that Bobby had his disability, and then she had a sister who had a cleft palate, and there were issues that, complications they had there. So we had something that connected us where other people didn't understand. Well, we went ahead, and she had her music scholarship to Eastern Kentucky, so she stayed there. She was a cellist. And I had my scholarship on my horn, so I went to Indiana State University. And so anyway, we went through our 4 years, and then she went ahead, and she was a year ahead of me, and so she wanted to do her graduate work. But I remember her saying at that time, she said, "I'm going to go to New York, and I'm going to be a singer and so forth." And I said, "Well, I'm going to go home, and I'm going to get married and have a family." So that's exactly what we did. Except she went to New York, and she had a band, and she was the lead singer for the band, but they played at the Playboy Club. It was a real exclusive place in one of the big hotels or big skyscrapers there. And
when you say Playboy, do you mean like Playboy, or
Playboy, she was like their lead.
like Hugh Hefner and all?
Yeah,
Okay.
and she was. I mean, she was not a playgirl,
Yeah.
or she wasn't a bunny. She was just dynamite. And my husband, the one that was the musician trucker, anyway, he loved anytime he said, "Oh, she sounds just like Barbra Streisand." I mean, so anyway, she ends up marrying Eddie Brigati. And he is one of the Rascals. Remember the Rascals grooving on a Sunday afternoon? Mm-hmm. And I Just Want to Be Free, all those movies. That's who she ended up marrying. Mm-hmm. And he is the coolest guy in the world. She taught school for like 40 years up in that area. And she had, and Susan, if she ever sees this, she'll probably correct me, but I know that she worked with the underprivileged and the inner city kids, and she would go bang on doors and say, "Why wasn't Johnny at school today?" and so forth. And she was in music, and she just did wonderful. And Eddie never had to work. He basically has just lived off of royalties since he played his tambourine and wrote all those songs when in the '60s. And he's such a wonderful, wonderful person, and they're both just great people.
Why don't you kind of share with us if you have any kind of words of wisdom, any advice, anything that you'd like to impart on these upcoming generations?
I think the biggest thing is to not worry about things, because it works out. I've been high and I've been low, and I've seen high and low in all the people around me, and there's a lot more I could expound on in my family, but it always works out. I mean, God has your back, and He'll help you, and you just don't worry about it, because it doesn't do any good to worry about it. It eventually will work its way out, and things will get better. I would just hope that all of my kids, will get close to God, because I think that's what makes it easy to get through all these things. I don't know how you get through life. This is rough life. This is a lot different now. These kids today, and that it's changing. It's changed tremendously since I was little. Life was a lot simpler, and so you're going to be dealing with a lot more complicated things. But it's just keep looking on where the end prize is, and you'll get there. And that's it.
All right. Thank you very much, Mary, for sharing with us.
You're welcome.